The corruption of family court is widespread and completely destroying lives. Maryann Petri has suffered all of the abuses perpetrated by the court system, having her children taken, being falsely accused, losing her job, and then being sent to debtor's prison where she nearly lost her life. Maryann has also taken on the system and won in Superior Court. However, it's never going to make up for all of the damage that has been done to her children and her family. With a fighting spirit, Maryann has written multiple books and hosts a successful YouTube channel, Slam the Gavel, where she educates and empowers others who are being forced to run the family court gauntlet. Today, we are discussing the first of her 3 books titled Dismantling Family Court Corruption: Why Taking the Kids Was Not Enough. So, Maryann, to start out, would you just share why you wrote this book?
I wrote this book to help other parents learn from my situation and to empower them to understand the system and to realize that it's not going to be
Oh,
fair.
that's important. Yeah. They go into
Yes.
it not realizing the corruption,
Mhm.
which is right there in your title. Dismantling family court
Right.
corruption. I think there's a lot of people who understand what you're talking about, because unfortunately
Mhm.
this kind of abuse is widespread. What are some of the reasons that you think that courts are so abusive to people? What is the motivation for that?
These courts are money courts. They want parents to litigate. The lawyers encourage it.
Mhm.
The lawyers drag out the cases along with the judges. And it's a who knows who of individuals with personality disorders. And I encourage every parent that if you are being pulled into family court to do research on that judge. Find out if that judge is friends with the opposing attorney or even friends with your own attorney. Because I have talked to parents where their own attorney ruined their
Mhm.
case.
Yeah.
So I would even go as far as to get a private investigator on them if you
Yeah.
can.
I think it's really key though that you're sounding the alarm that a lot of people are in your positions and so they know, but I see a lot of people going into court
Mhm.
to settle a divorce. And having published your book, I feel like going, you need to read this so that you don't get this far down the road before you find out that you're getting abused. I was going to use a word that would be inappropriate,
Mhm.
but it would be appropriate, just not not on air. You know,
Yeah.
and you're able to teach them what to expect in, unfortunately, more cases than not, I would say. It seems like it because
Mhm.
it is, unfortunately, our courts, and I work with incarcerated veterans, and I see what happens in the criminal courts as well. And I would just say our courts are an
Mhm.
industry now, and it's not about
Oh,
justice,
yes.
sadly. But your book shows them what can happen through a very interesting story that you tell. And then in your book, you have
Mhm.
a section called Takeaway, right? Could you share a little bit about what you're
Mhm.
doing with your book and how you've structured it?
Well, we did this takeaway to condense what was said in the chapter, but it also explains, what was behind the words that were written. That way the parent can understand more of what was said, but it's only deeper in the
Yeah, so you're
takeaway.
kind of like showing your story, and then the takeaway is where
Mhm.
we get like technical terms or the specific
Mhm.
advice and wisdom that you have based on what you went through. Kind of like it'd
Right.
be like what you wish you knew, right? That you didn't have.
Exactly. Everything's
Yeah, the
hindsight.
hindsight. You could probably call it hindsight too, huh? Yeah, that, and I
Mhm.
really find your book valuable. Now, I'm gonna just mention that this is, the introductory interview that I like to do with authors, ask you a few questions, and then we're going to be, recording a number of episodes where we actually get down into it and talk about a lot of the wisdom and the instruction that you provide in your takeaways during the book. So
Mhm.
everybody subscribe to this channel, like if you're enjoying this, and that will actually make it easier for you to see the next video when it pops up and helps others to find this information, and people need this information. So I want to ask you,
Mhm.
could you just tell us a little bit about your cover? It's very unique. Uh, there it is
There
on
it
your
is.
couch. That's the artwork that
Yeah.
became your cover.
And I had used my husband's white T-shirt. I ripped it up. I formed a gown. I wanted it to be three-dimensional. I used silver leaf. Unfortunately, I did paint it in my image, not to be, I just my, previous publisher did not wanna use my
Oh,
name. They wanted me to use a pen
they're
name,
afraid to
so
take
I
on
thought
it.
the only way I'm gonna
You
do
know,
this. Yes, they were
yeah,
afraid.
that's
Yes.
interesting. Not to get off topic. I want to circle back around to that. Stay on top of the beauty of your cover, but we'll get over to the just what you're up against when you're trying to dismantle something so large as the court system.
Mhm,
I love your cover. It's so impactful to look at, and it says so
mhm,
much in the visual. You're there kind of with this um, blinder
mhm.
on, with just a
Smirk.
little, just able to see a
And
little bit, holding a scale that's clearly
yeah.
not even, and yet a sword in your hand.
Mhm.
Can you describe what the elements
And
of this cover and why you put them there?
well, the elements were because her blindfold is only covering one
Hmm.
eye, that means that represents collusion,
Mm.
in my opinion. And the smirk is also
Oh,
representing
it is
collusion
a
because the
smirk. It
case is
really is. But it
yes.
does look like
You
you
right, because
if you were smirking. So
oh,
so it's
oh,
you, but it's not you. In this
well,
case, it's sort of like this is what the judge did to you, and the judge was smirking at you, knowing full
right,
well what he and she was doing. Because you had multiple judges that you had to
right,
deal with. Is that right? Mhm.
right. And what people don't understand is, the scales are unbalanced because they know they're gonna pick a target parent that they're gonna make pay.
Mm. That's a good term to bring up, target parent. We'll be talking
Mhm,
about that term and also a term called parental alienation, which is what happened to you
mm,
in the next episode as we start to take a deeper dive into your book. Um, you are a warrior. You definitely did right by putting that sword in your hands, and I've watched you over the last 3 years since this book has been published to build this Slam the Gavel channel. You have had some
mm.
incredible interviews. I'd say most of them are um, well worth listening to, because I don't know where you find them, but you're interviewing some really expert people and some powerful people on your show. How do you
Yes,
go about bringing them
yes,
on, and how are you fighting court corruption?
well, I let them share their experience. I find when I interview parents that have been through such injustice, it just helps them to talk about this on the podcast, and that's their way of being heard. They need to be heard, and that also helps with the healing process, especially when you have been so abused by the legal abuse of the family
Yeah.
court system.
I can see that you are networking people as well. Um, I know
Right.
your latest book that we'll be talking about in the future is titled "Raised by These Wolves," where you've actually put together a collection of people's experiences and stories that they've shared with you, either on your show or working with them specifically.
Mhm.
But you've connected people who are actually helping each other fight. Is that right?
Apparently, this is what has happened and evolved out of this Slam the
Yeah.
Gavel podcast.
It's really fascinating to watch, and it's what you're doing really, and that's that there's somebody who's a little farther down that road is going back and helping someone
Mhm,
who's just sort of beginning and empowering them. And I know working with you, I'm seeing some people who are
mhm,
starting to win in court because the ones who've gone through and,
mhm,
and been through the gauntlet, as I like to call it, are going back and saying, okay, this is
mhm,
how you run the gauntlet successfully, and they're doing it more successfully.
mhm,
So there is a lot to be said about sharing your stories and sharing your wisdom. And with that, I would put out a call to anybody who's watching this show. If you're going through this, or if you've been through this, please comment. in the comment section and share what you have to tell about the experience and what you have to teach, because I know in the course of working on a lot of these books, some of the most effective information that I get these days comes from social media and from YouTube comment sections. We learn so much
Mhm,
from each other, and your book really does that. It's very easy to read, even though it's a tough topic. You
mhm,
did a good job of keeping
mhm,
each chapter short enough to tell the story and then get into what you have to teach. And I
mhm.
found that I was fascinated by what you faced. You've been through hard things. You were put into debtor's prison. You had a heart attack. Yeah,
Mhm.
because of.
Right, and of all of this, and I think it's more fun to put in a book. I think it's good to put
Mhm.
pictures in, so there's pictures to look
Yeah,
at
so
too.
there's some pictures, your mug shots in there. But I also want to point out that
Yes, yep.
you have some funny moments and some heart positive moments. So it's definitely, you had a win. So it's empowering.
Yeah.
What were your chances of winning? I mean, like that. I think you were saying like that almost never happens, because you'd also gone in a term called prosay. Can you describe what
Right.
that means?
Pro se means you are going in to represent yourself, and they consider pro ses crazy to do
Hmm.
that. But when you have run out of money because you're on your 4th
Because it's an
attorney who
industry that's
really didn't
milking
help
you,
you either.
is why.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And a lot of parents, in fact, I was reading some stats, and I really can't quote them all, but there's more pro ses out there than there ever have
Because
been.
people are running out of money. And honestly, I think the what I saw in you is that a lot of times the lawyers are just, they're kind of laissez-faire about it. They're not that invested, they're not that
Right.
passionate, and you are. And they're not doing the work that
Mhm.
needs to be done to really represent you. So, and that's another thing I think
No.
you've done a good job of teaching, is telling people how to go pro se and not to be afraid to be pro se, because the courts really are going to intimidate you against doing that, because they don't
Oh,
want you to do
definitely.
that. So, but the more that you bring out the fact that they are corrupt and that they don't want you to do the things that you could do to defend yourself,
Mhm.
this is all part of that key word in your title, which is dismantling this family court corruption.
Mhm.
But you mentioned, I want to circle back to what you talked about, that I'm not the first publisher that you approached with your book, and so you had one that didn't want to
Mhm.
use your name, and so that's kind of why you put your face on the painting. Um, why is that that they didn't want to use your name? And I just think it's good to point out the bravery of what you're doing to take this on.
It was just terrible to go through 2 publishers, and then that one before I met you, they said that, "Okay, so, there you lost your job as a nurse, but why don't we say that you were just, laid off because there were too many
Oh,
nurses?" It's like, that's not what happened, and anybody that knows me knows the
laid
whole
off. Well,
story.
losing your job as a nurse is
So
what caused you to then um, sort of end up, well, you ended up in debtor's prison because they were still trying to make you pay child support on the children they took away from you on a salary that you no longer had, that they caused you to lose, and through a false accusation.
correct.
Yeah. So yeah. Well, Marianne,
Mhm,
you are truly an incredible person. I think it's also important to point out that you have been talking with film and television professionals, and you're in the
mhm.
you've got a script and kind of in the process of taking your life experience and putting it into the silver screen, where we can learn from you on that level. Do you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, yes, I have written a screenplay, so I never thought I would be a producer either, and I met up with director Adam Worth, and he's an Emmy award-winning director. We have to put together a trailer. This is going to
Yeah.
take time. This is not going to happen in a year or 2 years. So, the trailer will happen probably within a year, but
But but
everything
the
takes
point is
time.
he's bought into it and he recognizes what an important
Right.
film this would be. We see films like Aaron Brockovich and the like, where we're really able to take on the corruption that exists in corporate America, and now the corruptions that exist in the courts, and we're
Mhm.
watching. There's celebrities that are going through this right there in real time in front of all of us,
Right.
that show this is not something that can't affect, that only affects a certain economic level, or area of the country or anything like that. It's affecting everybody. um, and I
Mhm.
really think, like I said in the introductions, this is widespread, and it's devastating. We're seeing
Mhm.
parents who've had their children taken away from them and never get a chance to get them back, just committing suicide. Unfortunately, it's not
Right.
uncommon. And so I applaud what you're doing. You're
Mhm.
giving people hope, when they're so
Mhm.
frustrated that they're losing hope and they're on the edge of just completely giving up. Your book, your show, hopefully your movie soon, are the things that are going to make them go,
Mhm.
okay, I'm going to fight this, instead of just laying down and giving
Mhm.
up. So, um, well, we'll
Yeah.
be diving into your book more and talking a lot about the key terms that you teach. And I know one of the things you really went through was being alienated from your children. And so, just for those who are watching, be sure to subscribe so you can know when the next show is up. Although I'll probably have it up in time for you to just click on the thumbnail at the end and go learn about parental alienation, and continue to watch. And really, if you're going through any of these kinds of experiences and abuses, we would love to have you comment and see how much we can help each other. And so, with that, Maryann, I look forward to talking with you in the next Triumph Talks, and we will see you in the next show.